Go ahead and
Pick
hit
your
it.
nose. That's your first line.
Pick your nose. That's your, yeah. So, I mean, I think even there's another spot where you say, oh, pick your nose companion. You could say, I want you to now pick your friend's nose. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick our friend's nose. And then you can pick the nose of your friend instead of pick your nose companion. It's always very visual as to actively picking someone else's nose.
So pick your nose companion. Clearly that wasn't clear that was like a workbook. So that's what the pick your nose companion was.
Oh, I thought it was get a friend. I didn't. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. But that's an interesting point and important for clarity purposes. So I appreciate that. Okay.
Noted. Yeah, that makes more sense now. Any Hoosiers? Great. Well, my notes are gone. I'm out. See you guys. So I think like there's ways to play with the no versus nose thing a little bit up top. I felt like there are instances at the beginning, and this is some of my nomenclature, and I apologize for that. I feel like a lot of
nomenclature or nomenclature. I'm sorry. Please.
You ain't wrong.
Carry on.
You ain't wrong. Can be you. There are a couple instances up top where you do what I refer to as a challenge to fight with your audience. And that's saying something that you either want them to respond on, and it's not a great idea because they're gonna either you give them an opportunity to tell you to fuck off. Sorry, tell you to go away. Or there's an instance wherein you are asking them to take a vision down a road that you're not going to take them on. So for instance, does anyone have that feeling when you say up top? And that for me is a space where you're just begging for one guy in the very back to go, no, and then you've lost control of that room entirely. So how can we reframe our questioning, or how can we reframe those experiences to bring them on board? So you could say, I need to talk with you about this, or I would like to speak about this, or I have a feeling when. So if you keep it closer to you, they've hired you already, so it's less space for them to, you don't need to give them an opportunity to tell you to piss off. It's sort of like, I feel like what we do 9 times out of 10, and I think Greg can definitely agree with this because he's this guy. There are popular guys in high school that we all wish we were. Yeah, that guy especially. I think we can all openly agree that those people were not actively popular or should be in real life, but they didn't balk. They didn't believe in it at all, or they didn't like not believe it at all. And then all of a sudden we're all on board. And I personally, my experience is that if you fake it, everybody buys it. Plus they paid for you to be there, so they think that you know what the hell you're talking about. So don't give them a reason to think otherwise, is really what it comes down to. So also, when you start the speech currently by saying, I never understood the perfect storm, is the way that you said. As soon as you say, I never understood, my trust is broken. And then I'm wondering what you have to do to come back from that. So I don't know if you want to start with, you don't know something. You do know something. That's why you're there. You're awesome. You're wonderful. You know about nose pickery. What a great time we're about to have. What else did I notice? Yeah, I wonder if there is some nonverbal action that you can add. And I know you were reading it and you're working through it, but nonverbals connected to nose versus nose. Sorry, I almost did this. Nose versus nose, because the first time you introduced the concept in the speech as it stands, I kind of stopped listening and I wrote in my notes here, I was just like, oh, nose, 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 nose. And I'm just like writing that. And then I realized I wasn't listening. So if you could take that away from me and keep me with you by doing a nonverbal action that shows me the difference just the first time, so that it removes me from losing you on this road trip that we're on together. Because I genuinely believe that there's like, we're going from A to B and we stop at like side stops all the way down the road. So if we can do that together, it's going to be a lot more fun than you going, oh yeah, that was a cool place. You know. What else do I have for you here, my friend? Well, I think I've done enough talking for now. Who else wants to contribute? And then I'll go, oh yeah, how about this?
Greg, nice to see you again. Thank you so much, Pat.
Oh, sure.
I can add one thing about the shaking of the head, and then Jason, do you want to go next? Nod, subtle nod with the thumbs up. That's pretty confirmation. So my favorite part is how committed you are to the use of the word knows, right? So because even at the Minneapolis chapter, when you introduced yourself, this is like totally in you. And I think that that is amazing. Like whatever the thing is that you're going to do, just do it. And if you just do it, then no one else really will question it. I'm just kind of echoing what Pat said around like the confidence of it. The only thing that I would add to the head shaking thing, and this is where I get to be a nerd, is that not everyone shakes their head no this way. So the Ottoman Empire, Muslim, Christianity, they shake their head no this way. It's more of like a chin up versus a shake. So whatever gesture you're going to come up with, there is a potential cultural ramification of it. And just be mindful of that. You're welcome, your neighborhood diversity person. And Ottoman Empire trivia before 6:30 in the morning. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Never before has that happened to me. So thank you for that.
Get your money's worth. How can I help? How can I help? Thoughts or comments, or I'm going to toss it to Jason and Robin. We're not trying to overwhelm you. So you're driving the boat. So
You couldn't overwhelm me. I mean, I'm generally overwhelmed by this whole experience just because it has been so much fun. And I will say just the talking to different people and getting different perspectives of like, I think when I spoke with Greg, I think he was like, just the difference of like, involve the audience, don't involve the audience. You're the person who talks. Don't let them talk. Let them talk. You don't talk as much. So it's like, and I love all of that. I love the figuring out the balance of perspectives and things like that. Here's how you involve them more. Get them up on stage. Don't let them talk. And it's so cool because everybody is successful in how they're doing it. And so I love that I'm taking so much information and recognizing that there is so many great nuggets to pull from everyone who I've spoken to so far. So I might be overwhelmed, but you're not going to make me cry. Jason, you're on. Challenge accepted.
And the only other thing I would add to that too is that all the advice you're getting is obviously from all of our experiences, and we have had things bomb in a way that sent us to therapy, and we have had things magically work out that sent us to therapy, right? So once you commit to whatever you commit to, great. And now you have all these ideas like little index cards in your back pocket. So when the meeting planner says someone didn't show up, can you now do this for 3 hours? You're going to be like, more audience interaction. Hold on, let me pull out those index cards, right? So that's also a possibility. All right, Hewlett, drop your wisdom.
Just real quick, I just need to make this comment. When you said, we've all bombed at certain things, all three of you folks went like this really sad, remorseful, like, yeah, I remember. Son of a gun.
Well, we
Okay.
don't work in a cubicle, so it's fine.
Yes. Jason, hello.
Hi, Robin. The bombing works way too much for me. I do it all the time. And so all I'm going to share with you that's different at all from what I wrote, and I hope what I wrote makes sense. I'm coming from a performance perspective, obviously, as somebody who comes from being a showman and now trying to prove that I have content. And that for me has been the trick. The hardest part about being a keynoter is that I had to essentially strip out all the show stuff, set it on the side, create the content, allow the content to be the keynote, and then mix the show back in. And so what I was saying in my words to you was simply that if you could pull out all the training stuff, set it on the side, do the content, do your stories, really drive them home, and then bring the training stuff back in, whether that's audience involvement, people on stage, however you'd like that to work. It's all up to you. Here's what's dangerous about this process, Robin, with all of these personalities who are strong. is that you might think there's a right or a wrong way to do this. And there is not. You can create of it whatever you will. So if I say to you, put this over here, and you go, I don't like that idea. Good. Do what you feel is right. And I swear to you, anything I say, you can just throw it in the trash and be like, I like what Rob said better, or I like what Greg said, or I like, you know what I mean? So I hope that you're careful with this process with your own heart, because you know what you need to say and do. You've already done it. And so that's my best piece of wisdom for this. When I went to Lou Heckler, who was my speaker coach, and I don't know if you've looked into hiring Lou for any reason, but Lou was the best thing that I invested in for myself as I created a keynote, and I never even used it. And here's why I would recommend you consider him, because he helped me see that, yes, 3 points in a poem or 3 stories in a point really can be a great keynote. And he has his very simple method. He gives you one sheet and he says, fill in the blank. And I would say the same thing to you. I'd say, what is the point? What are the stories that drive the point home? And if you had 3 points, then do you have stories that support those? Do you have quotes that support those? Do you have research that support those? It's just building and layering something that feels not so much like a roller coaster that goes up and then crashes down, but rather something that slowly goes up. They say, hey, we need our keynote to go like this. That's not true. We need our keynote to go like this, and then up a little more, and then this, and then up a little higher, and then this, and then up a little higher. It's an emotional ride. And I loved the stories that you shared of people committing to things and then maybe not. And the way that you shared it, it was wonderful. I wanted more of that. I want more of your life. I want more of your expertise. I loved what Pat said about, being confident with what you're stating, not like, well, I'm not sure about this, but you are sure. You are the pro. They're listening to you for this moment of time, and you need to act like you believe everything you're saying. And that's an important point as well. Don't try to make them believe what you're saying. Believe that you believe what you're saying, and then they'll believe you. I think you already do, but as much as you can, state it to the point that they're like, wow, I am so convicted by her conviction that I'm going to change what I do. So that's my point, my 5 cents here.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks so much. What is the point? What is the story that drives the point home? More stories. Boom. And sell it. Confidence. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate that.
I'm really excited, Robin, to see how if you are willing to set some of the training to the side, create those stories, because this is going to make you such a better trainer too. This is going to make you be like, you're already masterful at it, but you'll then be the guru. It's going to be exciting to watch, because when you bring the training into the keynote, when it fits in the right place, then you're going to blow their minds. And it's only been in the last few years that I've brought in any kind of like training aspect into a keynote, but it's very, very careful. It's very small. And when I do those little touches with audience participation, it blows their minds. Then they want to hire me for more. They want to see the whole training. They want to buy the book. They want to have coaching, but I just give them little touches of it. Just like I give them little touches of entertainment. My presentation as a keynote used to be like, if I had a 60-minute keynote, I would do 45 minutes of entertainment and 15 minutes of message. Now I think I'm at 45 or 50 minutes of message, 10 minutes of entertainment that I could literally say, yeah, that's a show. So that's how I'd go about it. I'm proud of you, Robin. This is exciting.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
As the Robin, you and I talked, but as the like former teacher, trainer turned keynoter, I think the gem and what Jason said in like trainer perspective is there are times where like in the Q&A part, you'll be like, you know what? Take out a sheet of paper, right? And like you just pull this training out of your Batakis and you do the quickie version of it, and everyone in the room is like, what kind of fucking Jedi power is this? Because they don't know that you're a trainer, right? So I mean, I joke / have PTSD, not joke. I don't ever want to touch flip chart paper again. And what's weird is so much of my persona and confidence, I think, on stage now, that no one thinks of me as having a flip chart paper on stage, right? And so that will always be where I came from. So it's always in there. And then the only other thing is if you're doing kind of this worksheet that Jason was talking about, I always say, for me personally, and I try and tell other people too, but when you are developing a story or a joke or a something around kind of a new point, it needs a small, medium, and supersized version of the story. And I'm finding, present progressive tense, but I'm finding that if my new joke or my new point can't be small, medium, and supersize me, it's probably just funny to me. Which is a lot of things, right? But if I can like make it quippy, make a normal size story or expand on the story without me getting kind of lost of what I'm talking about, then I think that I've got something there. Like there's something worth here. So then in front of an audience, even if I was still doing trainings, there's keynote-y aspects to trainings that are transitioning between the different activities. Don't tell anybody our secret. So then in a training or in a keynote, I would then make sure I'm practicing the small, medium, and supersize me version of the stories, which means if there's 3 points, one of them may be a small story, one of them may be medium, and one of them may be supersize me. And then next time you have to mix it up again so that you're managing for time, but you're working out and practicing the different sizes of the stories. And if you really can't compress and expand it, it might just be for your own entertainment. And I don't think that's something that you just create in like 5 minutes. I mean, I think that that's like long haul kind of work, because what eventually is, I think the points that you're making eventually become what people think of you about, right? So like curiosity used to be a point. And now I would think that that's probably one of the main Ghostbuster streams that somebody would say I talk about. But I've now taken my point and broken it down into multiple kind of points that all lead back up to curiosity. But I don't have a job, right? Like this is the only thing I do. So that's only taken 20 years. So hurry up, Robin. Pat, your hand and or finger are up.
Just one thing to add on to everybody too, like, we're just piling on this morning. From a show structure perspective though, do keep in mind too, with your stories and all of this beautiful gloriousness, you have to start with you to introduce the audience to you, right? As we know, but do give yourself an opportunity to let the last thing give enough time so that they're back in your story, in your life with you, so that they leave with your brand instead of a story about somebody else. And then they're thinking about that person. Was
that your note? If somebody made that note, I think that might've been you. And it was so like, maybe. I don't care about this last person you talked about. The last person you talked about should be you. I think that was your notepad. That's such a good one. It makes all the sense.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Greg's popular. Okay, keep going. Yeah.
Greg, do you want to soothe us with that amazing voice of yours? Please unmute yourself. It's
you're
totally
muted,
worth it. He's got a fancy sound system, so he's got multiple buttons. He has
there it is. I just wanted to let you know that I was the drum major in high school, so that should tell you all you need to know about my level of popularity. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like the limited exposure I have to this industry, I shared as much of that as I could with you on the first call. And what I wanted to try and offer today was, you've had a couple of weeks, I guess, feels like I have a 2.5-year-old, so a day feels like a week. You've had, you know, some time to sort of digest all the information you got. How has your thinking changed, or what questions have changed since we first got together, and what do you have now? And I want to echo what Jason said and what Pat, and I'm sure Jess said too, like, you know, I'm still figuring this out in the business, and I'm like a really heavy researcher. So I've gone to a lot of people and say, you know, tell me how to build a keynote and how do I do it? And I've got one person recently that sort of started to mentor me, and they're like, here's the framework. And so I sat down, I was like, all right, I'm gonna plug my stuff into the framework. And it took 2 or 3 weeks of me going like, I'm terrible at this. This is never going to work. And finally having a conversation with my wife and being like, oh, that's how it works for them. It's not how it's going to work for me. So anything I shared with you and anything I can share with you is like, it's just based on what's worked for me. So.
That is quite honestly, Greg, I think what's been the most fun about this is understanding that like there are such important nuggets that I've gotten from everybody, and a lot, like there's significant differences in the way that you all are operating. And I think that's like, I didn't know that. I thought that there was sort of a way to do it, and I didn't know what that one way was. So that's been sort of my big lesson, is like the commitment of like, don't ever do this, and the next person going, always make sure you do this. And me just nodding and smiling and going, that's so great that you are absolutely making it work with that, your rule of never or always do this thing. And the next person is doing it opposite and making it work. So I love that lesson. But from that too, when you said big research nerd, and incidentally, Greg, you're a really fun rabbit hole to go down as far as like watching stuff. So thank you
That's
for
what
that.
all the
I did
ladies
that.
say.
That so after we hung up, I that was really fun. But mentioning the research piece too, that's one thing that I have not added, is a lot of credibility kind of stuff behind it. That it was, and I think it was you that said something about. Sorry, I'm about to quote somebody else. I'm sorry.
That's
something
okay.
about
We generally like each other, so you can confuse us. It's totally fine.
I spoke with Greg and Jeff a half hour apart from each other. Something about the research. The research is it was a significant quote, and I'll remember it forever. Something about the stories and the research is the transition, but the stories are the thing that matter. It's something like that.
Oh, that was something I heard from another keynoter when I first was getting like Mark Sharonbrock, and we were talking about what he memorizes and what he sort of just knows intuitively, and that his stories are something that he knows, but the transitions are so tightly scripted because that's what lets him get from the one story to the other so effortlessly. Yeah,
that was such a good note. That was
that's Mark's, not mine, but I just, yeah, but it is. I mean, that's amazing. Have you gotten to do this at all, or have you done anything where you've pulled some of this material in since we talked, or what have? I've compiled a lot more notes. You should see what I've got going. I mean, it is a mess. And so I've got a 3-day book writing, kind of keynote book thing next week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is fully committed to nothing else. I cleaned out my calendar kind of as a takeaway from this call and the previous calls. But so I haven't added anything significant that I can share. I have up here. So for what it's worth, this is one thing that I don't know if I shared with you last time that's been really helpful for me. Like, you can't work on a whole keynote. I have found it really difficult to work on my whole keynote all at once, right? And so somebody gave me this sort of like permission slip to go, just work on the first 3 minutes and then do the rest of the 57. And then next time you come out, if the first 3 worked, work on the next 3 minutes and then do the next 54. And just, that's like, keep building and building and building. For me, that's been really helpful. And it's been a permission slip to go on stage and go, okay, it may stink terribly, but like, I think generally I've got the chops to go out there and make it okay. But that first 3, my mission is to go out and make that first 3 lights out fantastic and get that super duper polished. Like, you've gotten so much feedback from all of us. I'm sure that it feels like, how do I go put all of this into practice right away? And like, my advice would be, don't just put the first 3-ish minutes into practice and really get that. So you go out and feel like it's lights out and then build. I'm also like, I think the newest in this. So feel free to override me or give better advice.
Well, and that was you. I think that's such a solid piece of advice too, is like, you got to just, you can't be moderately okay for 60 minutes. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just for the sake of being thorough, I would say that there are a hell of a lot of keynoters that are moderately okay for 60 minutes, and that's like a job, right? Like that, the bar of being like, wow, that was amazing, is relatively low. And you only have to be amazing to one person in the audience for 1 millisecond, and you will have a raving fan, right? So the nudge that I would give Robin to what you just said is that you have a chunk of time to hit as many one people as possible. And so like different kinds of stories, different ways of talking about things is to get to different folks. So if I had, like, let's say hypothetically speaking, like a middle school boy level of sense of humor, that's only going to hit a certain amount of people in the audience. So then it's going to have to be some other compelling story, or like to Jason's roller coaster, I'm going to connect to different people at different times. And at the end, it's like bad window shades, like it all rolls up together and they either liked it or they didn't like it. And they usually can't even articulate what it is. Like, what was your takeaway? She's great. That is not helpful, but that is like knocking it out of the park, right? The other, I would be fascinated if, like, after you congeal all this together and you come up with what it is that you're going to do. And Greg, to your point of being the newer one on the call, is that y'all probably are far more flexible and open to new things than people who've been doing this for a long time, because we have all the bombs of like, oh no, I'm not doing that again. I'm never telling a story about peanut butter and jelly again, ever again, never again. I did it once in 1974 and it didn't work. Right. So the flexibility of the newness is exactly doubling down on what Pat opened with, is just pick your way and test it out. And the last thing I'll say is to Greg's, like, practicing 3 minutes at a time. You don't even have to go in order. I feel confident that I can say this, is that I got the middle of my speech like really good. And I still think I can't close my speech. I never know when to shut up. But the intro is also always super awkward because I have no idea what I'm going to say until I literally talk on stage. Now, my guesses of what to do are getting better, but I think I have of my speech, I think the weakest part is the intro and the conclusion, but like the gooey part of the Oreo, nailed it. Like, I feel very confident about this. I'm still working on this, and it's not like a memorized transcript, but I guarantee you, whatever it is I say, the opening and the closing will be the weakest part. And then there's like awkward transitions in between the pieces, between familiar material and brand new things that I'm saying that also make absolutely no sense. Like, if I watch my videos, like, I didn't even finish a thought. This isn't a perfection kind of thing. And the audience is on a ride. They're not going to be like, that bump hurt a little bit more, or like, you just get to go, and then they roll it all up together and it's fine. It like, again, the bar is to like, did you want to commit homicide? Did you fall asleep? No and no, nailed it.
And admittedly,
The smaller I can make those little things, the better, between homicide and sleeping.
Right.
and usually, just to be clear, the end of Jess's speech, she goes halfway through a story, she stops, she lays down on the ground and just slowly rolls off stage sideways. It's not, so when she says it's not compelling, I disagree, but that's me.
Jason, were you going to say something? It looked like you're going to say something.
It's just fun to sit and listen in on this. I'm still laughing because I have a hard time with the opening too. and the close. I
Oh.
still close with a Billy Joel song, you know, and
Me too.
and hearing Pat talk about how you should close with the story about yourself and stuff, I'm thinking, oh man, you know, there's just so much to learn, even in all of this. I make a really nice living doing this, and I still don't think I'm good at it. So, I mean, it's interesting how we all see this process. So that's what's fun about it. It's really just experimentation.
Awesome.
I think that if any of us said like, I am an excellent keynoter in the wrong context, we would sound like an egotistical shittard. And there's plenty of that in the business. And we are all solidly good and all have off days. And sometimes that's an important little pep talk too, right? Is that like, that was not good. But my not good is better than like someone who doesn't do this for a living getting up there and doing it. And I have to remember that, but I will be so self-critical. I mean, for years after something that I was disappointed by, but luckily most sapiens do not have my standards to try to meet. They're they're just trying to have an experience. James, you have welcomed us with your video
Look
presence
at this hair model that just showed up on the call.
and a new haircut. Thank you very much. Are you channeling Kyle? Is that what's happening with the little flip?
Yeah, I don't know what's going. It's pretty windy here in Philadelphia. Greg can tell you. I'm on the Hertz bus. Can you hear me okay? Maybe a little loud.
You sound great. I can't
Sound
hear
great.
anyone else except you.
Love it. Shout out to these headphones. Thank you. Yeah, my hair looks like a hot mess. I'm now just seeing it for the first time since I left the hotel room when it looked fine.
I think it looks great.
I think you look
Thanks.
terrific.
Thanks.
Do you
want
have
me to
things to add, or were you just gracing us with your presence?
Both. Mainly the second one. Thank you for letting me be on this call with the video off. I was driving to the Philly airport. I spoke up in Kutztown yesterday, so love that. So sorry we couldn't connect, Greg. What I really want to do is be redundant. So no, Robin, this is so good. I have 2 pages of notes for you. And we're going to get into those when you and I hang out over coffee. And also because what I also know is that a lot of these notes are indeed redundant from what other people have told you. I've already learned that on this call. And that's beautiful. I'm glad to see there's some congruency, but there's also some creativity in what you're hearing from others, which is beautiful. So I have the benefit over the group of knowing you and of spending time with you and being on committees with you. And the biggest thing that I was missing from this talk is you and your personality. You are so expertly sassy, expertly snarky, right? You're the person I want to sit next to in the back of the class because you're just dropping little witty stabs and it's great. And so I missed some of that. And I know that you were reading, and so it's a little bit different. Your timing, in jazz, they say they don't write all the notes down because they leave space for magic. And this, you left some space for magic as well. And so that's beautiful. But I definitely was missing some of your personality, in meetings, you come at people. And I want you to come at the audience, like Pat was talking about. Yeah, it's a really beautiful gift that you have, and it makes me fall in love with you as a human being, and I want the audience to do the same. So that's that. I also agree with ending on a story. The Julian story is just not strong enough. So ending on a story about you, we'll work on that. I think, as Jason was talking about the idea of writing the keynote, I love the way he put it, to write the keynote and then insert the training. I think that's really smart. I think so. As you're going through the work that you've done, some simple ways to find those places are where you ask a lot of rhetorical questions. You ask a lot of big, deep questions. For example, you have people do the reflection activity. As my laptop's open on this Hertz bus. But you ask people to do the reflection activity on joy and overwhelm. And after that, you have them write stuff down, and then you ask them a bunch of questions afterwards. And then you say, now let's move to overwhelm. That's a perfect example where we teach and don't ask. I don't know how long do you think what you gave us is? Obviously, it was only 40 minutes on a video, but how long would you say that presentation was? What was your dream length?
I don't know. Like with the participation, all that stuff, I figured it was probably, I mean, not terribly long, 45 minutes to an hour, maybe.
Cool.
I guess
I
that's a
think
huge difference, right? Between 45 minutes and an hour is a lifetime.
Yeah.
So
I think with the depth of questions that you were asking, and the interaction that you were doing, that this was closer to 90.
oh wow, okay.
Personally, like if you're going to give people enough time to think about what do you want, what do you not want, we're going to circle the values, ask 4 questions about each value, right? Those are really beautiful workshop things. Now, I'm not the kind of person who at NSA frequently confuses keynotes and workshops. In my opinion, I think we get a little too uptight about it. And you're allowed to have audience interaction. You're allowed to do all those things. This is you, right? You got hired to bring your magic. Screw what NSA thinks. And so I think you should have audience interaction in there, and some really beautiful places where you do. But where Jason, to help you get closer to what Jason was talking about, I think it's where you ask some of those rhetorical questions. Instead of asking a question, tell them something, right? You are the guru in that moment. And in the workshop setting, you can turn those into questions. So that's one of the things I would say here. I think the other piece.
Jess, is everything? Sorry, James, real quick. Jess, you okay?
Sometimes I forget that California is being California. The dogs are sound asleep like nothing just happened. James, while you were talking, we just had an earthquake, so I had to go check on things. I am the only person alarmed, so great.
James, you left off with thank you, Jess. Tell them something instead of having them figure it out is where you left off, and that the places of overwhelm is a great place to insert my stories. Is how you left that.
And if you ever questioned if I bring the thunder, Robin, now you know, as Jess experienced an earthquake while I was talking. So the last thing that I'll share today, and then we'll talk a whole bunch more when we get together, is one thing I felt you wanting to do was cover all the gray area of like, well, you could say no, but this is kind of like a no-ish. Like you talked about the moving story where it's like, I'm not going to help you move, but actually I got a couple of friends that'll help move because they knew this and they knew that. Like, I think at that point, it's just keep it clean for the audience. And it also saves you time. And it just makes you, again, sound as confident as I know you are about this. And the gray areas are what you write about in the book. That's where you find your length in the book. That's where you find your length in a keynote. And so for this particular thing, it's really just hammer it in. Don't worry about some of those gray areas. If it comes up in a Q&A, then you can obviously flex on them there like Jess was talking about. But for the keynote, keep it a little more matter of fact and forward moving, as opposed to 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which is kind of what the gray area and trying to account for that feels like. So those are just some ways as you're tightening this up to a true hour that I think you can do it. And that's all I have
really
for you right now.
James, thank you. I love the gray areas that go in the book. And so that's where I get my content there. Because let me tell you, I'm not loving that process. So that's great. And that and keeping it clean. Awesome. Thank you, James. Pat, do you have, there's hands up.
Who wants to go first? Doesn't matter. Oh, I'll go first. Okay. Because we're talking about the gray. And again, my experiences, so take them for what they're worth. I was not a band leader in high school. I'm gonna keep on Greg all day long, gang. The gray, speaking of the gray, I think like for me, it's always been the description of the gray for me is also a matter of the difference between a movie and a book. I think that as keynoters, we sometimes have a tendency to create parameters and create too much structure for our audience, robbing them of allowing them to attach themselves to your stories. So it comes to me simply as show, don't tell. Where you say, I feel this, you show them that in your body, you present it. Or if you want them to go down a certain road, like, I mean, when I say the difference between a movie and a book, the example for me is always the Hunger Games, which I think we've all read, especially Greg. The way that that manifests itself for me is that they talk at the very beginning of the Hunger Games about the forest that they're in. And the forest that I grew up in was in New Hampshire. It's a slightly different forest than the forest they're talking about, which would be different from Jason's forest, which is different than the redwoods, which is different than whatever they have in Philadelphia. So the concept of when I saw the movie, I was kind of disappointed because they never say where they are in that book. They talk about the forest, they talk about the air quality, they talk about how calming it is to be there. And those are emotions that I could attach myself to. But as soon as I saw the movie and I said, oh, they're in West Virginia, that I don't understand this anymore. And immediately took that visceral experience from me. So for me, the gray is letting your audience attach themselves emotionally and their life experiences to your story in subtle ways so that they feel like they're on the journey with you. And that for me manifests in that show, don't tell. Don't fill in those slots too much. Don't fill in that gray. Don't take that from them because they'll immediately not like you as much, in my experience.
So thanks, Pat.
Those are great points, Pat.
Thanks, bud.
And I'll echo that. I had a nightmare recently where I was on stage, and this is what happens when you keynote a lot. You have nightmares on stage, and I was giving too many details of the stories I've told with great punchlines, and I was not landing any of the punchlines, any of the funny, any of the points. I was giving way too many details. That was an actual nightmare I had the other night. And so the quickest way that I got to getting better at being a keynoter for me was that since I'm a writer before I'm a speaker even, was that I had to actually write my book. And that was a really painful experience. And I don't know if you're a writer more than a speaker, but if you are, writing is really a powerful way to say, oh yeah, this is what really works for the stories that will work in the keynote. And so honing in on the best stories and the best points, writing a book was very helpful. And everyone told me not to. They said, don't write a book, just create a great keynote. And that was the wrong advice for me. I needed to write the book to get a better keynote. And the other best thing that happened to me was COVID and the pandemic. Because I'm an entertainer, I was used to using this body and this face that can do all these funny things and these voices. I see friends shaking hands and how do you do? Guess what? People don't like that on Zoom. And it didn't land. It didn't sell. I had to learn how to look into a camera and say what I was going to say. And then eventually they'd say, oh, we heard you're entertaining too. And then I'd go, I see friends shaking hands. And they go, oh, that's awesome. Whereas before I was leading with that, they didn't want that. I had to learn how to speak into a camera and give my points. That helped me really refine my keynote. So doing it online is really helpful.
Awesome. And that was great. And the fact that your eyes just did the whole thing, that was, thanks for the entertainment piece of that too, Jason. That was great. But yeah, so the writing of the book has been in the works not very well since 2019. Late 2019 is when I kind of came up with this concept, and then hired a publisher last year, hoping that it would help prompt it. And so keep hoping. Thank you.
I don't know,
Just to-
Robin, if, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, just add on to what Jason is saying. I'm in the process of writing a book, and I was sharing with someone the other day how I found that, oh, I'll take my stories from my keynote and just put it in here. And as I start typing them out, I go, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes
Doesn't
sense
work.
when I'm saying it, but other people reading it, it's forced this clarity that now I've brought things into the keynote that never would have emerged but for the book, and it's making the keynote more clear and more precise. So 100%, it's a valuable tool. At least it has been for me.
Awesome.
What I was going to add is probably counter to what has been stated about books and or keynotes. So I wrote my first book, I wrote this book and hadn't entirely said things out loud, but the book like spewed out of me. So I wrote it. And there are definitely stories that are in the book that I have used at different points in keynotes and things like that. And definitely, to Greg's point, a lot of speaker books are transcribed keynotes, but they're very hard to read because we don't read and speak in the same way, which is why doing your own recording for your audiobook is like torture, because you are verbatimly reading a written version of a story, and you are used to saying out loud. Anyway, I wrote the first book, Publishing Story Shenanigans, for a later time if you are interested. During COVID, I thought I would like update the book and add book processing questions or book club questions or whatever, and do my audiobook. So I reread my book. But at that point, I had now done a keynote that had book sales at the end. So my speech got better than the book. And then when I reread the book, I had vehement arguments with the author because she's an idiot, because I had much better way of describing things or giving directions to certain things, because I had actually used the material in the first edition of the book so many times now in keynotes. I know what works with the average person outside of my brain, whereas the first book is really the catacombs of my cranium. So then the second version of the book is much more reader friendly and I think much more effective. But that's what I did during COVID, was argue with myself until I came up with the second edition. So I just want to throw out there that Jason and I both are talking to a fancy publisher guy, and the coolest thing he said on my call that I had the other day was, just pretend no one is going to read it and no one is going to buy it, and write it, because you can always rewrite it, but don't worry about this stuff of it. Just get it out of you. And so I started
first draft.
Yeah. So I think that my first real book is basically a bucket of all of my stories and my points. And that got it out. Then you can use a development editor or a copy editor to take things away. So as I have been writing the book I'm working on now, I think I am writing some keynote stories of a keynote that doesn't exist, but it's coming up for me while I'm writing the book. So I'm just documenting it in a Word document. I'll figure out what is the book and I'll figure out what is a keynote for me, working with an editor and fucking around on stage. Right. So that's how I'll learn that. It's all moving parts that support one another, but they're not. I think everyone would agree with this. None of this is ever like complete. It just doesn't mostly suck. That's the bar that you're shooting for. Jason, did you want to say something, or just nodding?
Just nodding. It's right. And they say dance like no one's watching. That's what I've always said. Write like no one's gonna read it. It's the best way.
The bar is that it mostly doesn't suck. Oh my gosh.
Because that's I'm not actually joking there, because
No,
you can screw up, not even say something that does not land and pivot in the middle of a speech or book, and they will keep going, or they put the book down and no one died. But you have time to make up for it in a real living set. Right. So we are at the top of the hour. Robin, last thoughts, comments, questions?
Wow. Thank you. I mean, just everything that you've done on this has been just your constant checking in and nurturing of this process has been so great. It has been such a pleasure to meet so many amazing people. Hopefully I'll see you in July in Orlando. Why July in Orlando and why not like December in Orlando? I live in Minnesota, for goodness sake. That would be the best way to go. But that being said, if I run up and hug you in the middle of influence and you go, wait, who is this middle-aged woman who's all over me? It's me. And so that'll be me thanking you. But thank you so much for just your time and your generosity. And I'm a huge fan of all of yours and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you. I don't know. It's not a great last word. I could do better with that.
Well, we can all be better at our close.
You know what? I hope that my party words just didn't mostly suck.
Don't
Nailed
most- There you go.
You nailed it, Robin. You're a wonderful human being.
Be well, everybody. Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye.